Today, we're going to have an exciting conversation with someone who was not an Imagineer, but who created probably one of the most famous quotes associated with the Walt Disney Company. And that is Sherilyn Silverstein. So if you're a fan of Horizons, this is probably the episode for you. Sherilyn, we are excited to have you with us today. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. And if you can dream it, you can do it. That's what I wrote. And I worked and I created that line for a company called Marsteller, for whom I worked from 1980 to 1982.
Really excited for this conversation because Horizons is a favorite of mine. And I know many others who follow the site and are interested in these old Epcot Center attractions. Feel free to tell us your story about your journey to that quote and beyond.
Well, I'll tell you, Mike, that's I don't know, it's longer than the American Revolution series that Ken Burns did. And feels to me as though it dates back that far, but it doesn't. I entered the world of advertising as a young woman in my mid to late 20s. It was not anything I had ever planned, but it was just serendipitously I got there. And in 1980, I got my first really big job, I would say, at a company called Marsteller. And at that time, Marsteller was its own company owned by Bill Marsteller. In fact, he had just left, and this company had been sold to a bigger company. But at any rate, they had women on staff before I got there. But when I arrived at Marsteller, I was the only female creative on staff as a junior writer, 27 years old, and terrified because every writer on that staff was absolutely stellar writer. They went on to do great things, all of them. And all men. Not that was a problem, but, it was like, wow. So I was afraid and I was terrified, but I knew that I could do it. I loved writing, and I generally got the assignments that nobody else wanted when I started out, because as a junior writer, that's what you get back in the day. I don't know how it is now, but you didn't get the big plums. You got, oh gosh, nobody wants to write this. You do it. And I saw those opportunities as opportunities. I learned from my grandmother, when opportunities come your way, you take them and you never minimize them. You do what you can and you make the most of it. And by doing that, I got awards and I started to get noticed. And along came this assignment for General Electric. General Electric was run by Jack Welch at that time. And he was a formidable, everyone knew who Jack Welch was, whether you were in business or not. He had a reputation as a very hard-driving, brilliant businessman. And he was running GE at the time. And we knew Marsteller, we were very small. BBD&O was a very huge agency. They had the General Electric account. They had a great tagline. BBD&O always did great work. That was where you wanted to work, really, at some point. And their tagline for General Electric was, we bring good things to life. And that wasn't going anywhere. That was etched in stone. And it was a great tagline because think about it. We bring good things to life. It works in so many different ways. At any rate, they wanted someone to work on their recruitment division. BBD&O didn't want to do it. And I'm only speaking from what I heard. I'm not going to say that I knew this for a fact, but it seemed to be too small and a part of the business for them. And it was an opportunity for Marsteller to really get a good name on their roster. So we were told we were going to pitch the recruitment division. So all the big guns in the agency, they were working on TV and they were working on bigger things. And I was assigned to do the print ads that we would run or that GE would run. The recruitment ads, which, oh my God, when people in our business heard recruitment ads, they ran as fast as they could the other way because who wants to do that? So, okay, let's see what happens. So I wrote a whole series of ads that would run in small publications. I'll show you the ad to show you what it looked. These were the recruitment ads that we did. This isn't what happened, but that was the layout. And I wrote on one of them, in quotes, someone saying, if you can dream it, you can do it. And that went to the presentation. I couldn't go. I was a junior. They put together the whole presentation. They went to see Jack Welch and GE. And I went my merry way. And the following day, the president of our company came in and he said, I have to tell you what happened. Now, this is like something out of a movie because For the rest of my career, this probably happened maybe two more times. So you can imagine me, I'm 20, I'm a kid. I don't know what I'm doing, I don't think. And he said, well, we went to the meeting and we showed the work and we had the work all lined up. And he said, and Jack Welch himself pointed to the ad you wrote and said, I am hiring your company because I want to buy that line. If you can dream, you can do it. And it was like I'd won the lottery. I've said that before. My jaw dropped and I thought, my gosh, I can't even believe it. He said, we're getting the business and you're going to work on it. And I did. So my partner, Marilyn, who was a great art director, she and I created a series of ads. We didn't have, the tagline was not, we didn't call it a tagline. We called it a theme line, but it was, if you can dream it, you can do it was the theme. We had a brochure. This is one of the ads we ran in the brochure. And you can see up here, this is hard to read, but if you can dream it, you can do it is the right up here. And I saved these. This was an ad for electric cars. Now, this is in 1981. GE sent me to Schenectady to their R&D division to walk through and to hear and I took you can't even imagine that I had 200 pages of notes, I think, everything that they were creating up there. And one of them was the electric car. Another one was MRI scans. There was no such thing as CT scans. So we would go into these buildings and they'd show us what they were doing. And this seemed like science fiction to me. Who's going to have an electric car? How are they going to look at your brain in slices? How are they going to ever do that? And it all came to pass, So at any rate, it was very successful. We did very well. And then several months later, he came in again, the man who ran our company. And he said, guess what they're going to use? If you can dream it, you can do it. He's going to put it on their Epcot Center at Walt Disney World. And I said, oh my gosh. I said, I love Walt Disney World. And so that was where it started, So fast forward to about, I don't know, how many years ago, 5 years ago, my husband and I are watching TV and there's a bank that advertises and they use quotes. And one of the quotes comes on and says, if you can dream it, you can do it, Walt Disney. And my husband turns to me and says, Walt Disney? Walt Disney didn't write that, you wrote. I said, well, what am I supposed to do about it? He said, we haven't even talked about that because that was the very beginning of my career, Mike. It really kind of launched me into other things. And I've done probably things one thing as famous as that since, but I said, well, I'll go Google it. And there it was, his name all over it. And I have a great respect for Walt Disney.
Sure.
But I also have learned over time that when you have done something, your name should go on it. If you've written something or if you've painted something or if you've written a piece of music, your name needs to be on that piece of work. It's all you have is your name, And so I said to my husband, Harold, Harrel, I said to my husband, all right, I'm going to pursue it. So I started writing in different websites and different blogs and different posts. I'm the person who wrote this, not Walt Disney.
Right.
And needless to say, I know there's a lot of people that, well, how could she say that? That's blasphemy, but it's not. And here I am,
Like you, I have a very high respect for Walt Disney. I think one of the greatest business people, animators, great minds of our time. And his influence on 20th century entertainment you can't compare it. And so having said that, Walt Disney created some of the most famous quotes that we've ever seen. And there's a long, long list, and I'll be happy to talk about them. But when it comes to this specific quote, as it relates to Horizons, which was an attraction created after Walt's passing as they developed Epcot, the theme park, and then GE jumped on. People may think Walt Disney may have said it in the 50s or 60s, but there's no record. There's no record of that. I'll be the first to defend Walt Disney on many things, but Sherilyn Silverstein wrote this quote. So
yeah. There's the same ring to it, Mike. I get that, but to get credit for what you do is really important. And I would also say to people who are young and starting out, there's always going to be people who, and it's just a fact of life, who take credit for your ideas, who don't give you credit for your ideas. Stand up for yourself and make sure people know what you've written and what you've done, what you've painted, once again, what music, what have you, if it's yours, it's yours. And it's really important, particularly with AI, it's really important because, AI is doing a lot. AI is doing so many things. And so it's really important, as if you as a person did it, make sure your name gets on it and it's not to some AI platform, which I'm not disparaging AI. I am a proponent of it actually for many different reasons. I don't think it's going to overtake us as creators. I think that it will be helpful to us in some ways. I do see that anything like that has incredible potential to cause harm. If you look at it as trying to look on the positive side, what good could it do? What good can it do us? That's how I see it. As regards, giving people getting credit for their work, make sure people know AI didn't do this one. Mike did it. Sherilyn did it, with a name did it, so.
Like I said before, like this quote has resonated with so many people, so many Disney fans, and your story is valuable. Your story means a lot to those that are looking at Horizons and seeing this missing piece. And we see quotes around Walt Disney World and Disneyland probably as well that have this quote and seeing it misquoted. It's a very meaningful attraction and there's a missing link, there's a missing piece to that. Again, we focus a lot on the history of these attractions and theme park planning and design. And we wanted to make sure that what we're saying is true and accurate from the creators and those who brought these attractions to us. And this is just one piece of that. It's not, the biggest piece of it, but it's one piece that's vitally important to understanding these attractions.
A quick story about my grandmother, Stella. She was from Greece and self-made and the strongest person I've ever known in my life, about 2 feet tall. Don't get mad at me, yeah. And when I first started working in the business, when I first got my junior job, she said to me, "You have to have courage. You have to be brave." Because she knew I was a coward. But anyway, I wound up having a full page ad on the back cover of Forbes magazine, which it was at that time a huge business magazine. It was one of the biggest. And I was for a bank, and I had a headline, and we had for the illustration, we had a famous artist at the time. He would draw the illustrations. We would send him the headline and he would draw to the headline. And he always signed his name on his illustration. That was part of the deal he did with the bank. I don't give you an illustration unless I sign my work. So I ran home when I got the copy. I got it off the newsstand because that's how we did it back then. And I raced to my grandmother's house. I couldn't wait to show her. So she sees the back of the magazine and she's looking at it. She says, "Where's your name?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "This man," all in Greek, she's saying to me, this man, his name is on his work. Where's your name? This part where you wrote it, where's your name? And I said, "Well, I don't have my name on it." She said, "Well, why does he?" I said, "Well, he's famous." And she said, "Well, that's how he got famous, because people know his name." She said, "You have to tell them you want your name on this." And I said, "Well, that's not the way it works." But even my grandmother, even before any of this, she was saying to me, "You have to have your name on." So she was right. So I kind of carry her tradition ahead with me too.
Take the credit for it. Somebody else is.
Yeah.
Right. So credit's going to be given somewhere. And if it's going to be given, it should be given to the person who actually did it.
Well, not to compare ourselves or myself with anyone like that, but walk into any museum and tell me what painting doesn't have the artist's name on it.
The quote incorporated into Horizons, "If we can dream it, we can do it." I know they changed the "you" to the "we." And that was from Imagineer Tom Fitzgerald, who currently still works for the company and does amazing things. Did Tom or anyone reach out to you and recognize you as the original creator?
Not that I know of. And I would say, I mean, I don't know how they would know how to reach me or whatever, but no, they haven't. And I find it interesting that Tom is still doing what he's doing, because, I would imagine that neither one of us is a Gen Z or a Gen Xer. And it's interesting to me that his imagination is still accepted and praised, and that he's still celebrated for the work he does and is still doing great work. Because one thing I did want to say quickly is that in the world I've worked in, which was advertising and marketing, now it's got all kinds of different names, branding, whatever you want to call it. Many people that are older are marginalized. It's not something people talk about, but I know people in the business that are 50 and 45 and not finding work. And I say to myself, I'm still working. I still work freelance quite often. And I say to that, well, I don't understand it because we've been doing it a long time. We understand we can still think conceptually. We're never going to come to the table with antiquated ideas. And I should say that, two of my taglines, one is Olive Garden, when you're here, your family. That's on the air now. I wrote that in 1997. It ran for many years. They dropped it and changed it. Now they've brought it back. So that's on the air. And I wrote another tagline for Bank of America, which is, what would you like the power to do? And that's now, it's all over their app. It's all over their advertising. And if you watch Ken Burns' American Revolution, you'll see that line on every episode because the bank is a sponsor program. So what I'm saying simply is that don't walk away from every generation of creativity, because all generations have something to offer. And my hat's off to Tom, because he's still doing this too. And he's still impressing people, and he's still making people happy in the happiest place on earth. And I think that's amazing. My favorite attraction, there's two of them. One of them is still, It's a Small World.
That's a classic.
Because I still think it's relevant. The more global we get, the more relevant it becomes. And also I loved Pirates of the Caribbean. I just loved that. Do they still, they still have it, right? Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah. I mean, there's been some modifications to it, but it's generally the same attraction. Pirates of the Caribbean, Haunted Mansion. It's a Small World, which again holds relevance to Walt Disney World, especially because was one of the attractions at the New York World's Fair in 1964, which was basically used as an experiment to see if the East Coast audience at that time would gravitate towards Disney's attractions. Saw how successful the 64 World's Fair was, and with that attraction being one of the major ones there, and Carousel of Progress, those attractions that if they were ever to close, I can understand why people would be upset.
Well, yeah. Orlando, just thinking about Orlando, it turned out to be sort of a place for my career for some reason, because that's where Olive Garden started also. And when I first started working on Olive Garden back in the day, they had 4 restaurants. The first time I worked on it. And then I kind of did other things, and then I came back to it in 1997, and that's when I wrote When You're Here, Your Family. So Orlando is where everything happened for me. I need to tell you a quick story we went to Disney World, my husband and my daughter and I, we went, and they had the Disney parade at that time. And we went to the parade, and all the characters come down, come marching down, and this huge balloon of Ursula, we're sitting on the curb there, and she comes over and she looks and she says, "Well, there's a handsome man if I've ever seen one." And it's my husband. And she says, and we were just we couldn't believe it. And he's looking at her. He says, "That's you. That's you." And my daughter was so excited. I'll never forget that. It was so funny. We had a great time. We went there twice. We went when she was smaller, and she didn't remember it really well. So we said, we have to go back because that way she'll remember. She insists she did, but she didn't.
I've devoted this podcast to learning about and speaking with those that have an involvement with the Walt Disney Company and that were part of that story, including you. You're part of that story. And so I think it's important for lifelong Disney fans, especially the parks, understand and appreciate the work that went into these attractions and experiences. Each of these attractions were conceived and developed and made a reality because of a enormous team that worked on every bit of detail on those attractions. It's a pretty impressive undertaking how every attraction had the also learning from those who were actually there building it. That's pretty impressive. So it's good to know their perspective and the stories that went along with that. Obviously, Disney has to know who you are. Your name is out there, and it's going to be out there even more after this interview. And so, do you feel that Disney should have taken that extra step in relation to that quote, or are you fine if it just continues as it is?
I think it's important for people to know that I wrote it. As far as Disney reaching out, I never even gave it a second thought because my feeling about it was, how would they know and why would they? And if they wanted to, that would be fine. I'm perfectly happy because when you know what you've done and you know what your work's been, and particularly my husband, my husband passed 4 months. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because of him. He was the one, as I said to you, turned to me and said, "You hold Disney. He didn't do that. You did." And he kind of got me going. But no, just as long as I get it out there that I did it, there's a lot of people that don't have any idea at all that I wrote When You're Here, Your Family for Olive Garden. I tell them but it's nowhere, there's no attribution for it. The company certainly, that was in 1997. It's not incumbent upon them to say anything, I guess. But so if it's up to me to do it, I'll do it. No, I have no second thoughts about that. If they want to, they can, but I'm perfectly content knowing that I did it and that now everyone else knows, or to the extent we can tell them, no, that's fine. When Jimmy on NBC bought the Olive Garden tagline, When You're Here, Your Family, they were hanging it up and they were going to do, We're All Family Here. And so as an advertising stunt, they did When You're Here, Your Family. And I wrote to him and I said, well, you just bought it for $1. Can now I buy it from you for $1? Because then I can have it, because it really, and I never heard back. That was a little disappointing because I thought, well, he can answer, but I know I did it. And no, I have no problem with that. Bambi was the first movie I ever saw with my mother. How can I ever be mad at Disney?
Of course, of course. And I know you mentioned your husband Harold just passed. We send our condolences to you, and also dedicating this show to your husband as well.
Thank you
I want to make sure we do that. Very important. And I just wanted to ask you, I know you mentioned your husband's influence and encouraging you to talk about this story, about the Horizons quote. Could you tell us more about your husband and how he encouraged you and influenced you to take this extra step to tell your story, and this story that should be told about your involvement with the Horizons quote?
Harold was a fine human being. He was kind and good and had the most wonderful sense of humor, very dry. And he was my champion, my partner. We were together for more than 50 years. For 50 years we were together. And through every phase of our lives, he always supported everything I wanted to do. I was a working mom. Back then, it was even harder than it is now. I mean, I struggled with that from time to time. I wanted to be a good mother, but I wanted to pursue my life as a writer. I had always wanted to do that. And he was there for that always. And in that business, in the advertising business, as it was called then, I really am not quite sure what they call it now, marketing, I guess. I work in it, but I don't know what they call it. It's particularly, it was really stressful and really competitive. And, as a woman in the early days, competitiveness was kind of frowned upon. It was, you're not supposed to be competitive. Well, I am. He was always there and always supportive. And he said, it's really important to stick up for yourself and to make yourself heard. And to make yourself understood. He felt as though, I was always the glass half empty and he was the glass half full. But I learned to be the glass half more full because of him. So he was also in advertising for a long time and an absolutely fabulous father, the best father ever. So I always think, there was my life before I met Harold, and then there's my life now, but there was my life with him. Whatever I became or whatever I become better because of him, that is what I want to carry on for him. I don't want to drown in sorrow because he would absolutely not want that. And yes, he said to me, I know it's Walt Disney and I know you're going to get flack. He said, but I know I know what the truth is. And so do you. I said, okay, I'll do it. But anyway, thank you for letting me talk about him because he was the love of my life.
Thank you for sharing all of that. It's important that this quote becomes, when I started doing more research and looking deeper into it, it's like, when did Walt say this? I mean, he said so many wonderful, wonderful things, and it's only fitting that he said this too, because
Too bad he's not here because he could verify this from
he
his end.
could. And he, what we're going to do, I'm going to get in touch with Disney and I'm going to tell them about this story, if you don't mind.
Not at all. Not at all.
But I'll let them know that this conversation was had and your name is associated with this quote, the "If you can dream it, you can do it," and then evolve to, so I can do my part in helping
Thank you, Mike.
your story get to where it has to be. Again, 'cause I don't.
One of the taglines that I wrote in the last several years that I feel is really compelling. I wrote for the Army Lead the Way Fund. And the Army Lead the Way Fund is for Army Rangers who have been lost. It's a fund for their families and a fund for Army Rangers who've been catastrophically injured. And Army Rangers, as you well know, they are the elite group. They go and they do many deployments, many times. And Jimmy Regan was a young man who lost his life, and his father started the Army Lead the Way Fund for the Army Rangers. And the tagline I wrote for that is "Peace can be held too." War is hell was a famous line that came out of the war, I believe World War II. But I wrote "Peace can be held too" because for these people who are returning catastrophically injured, or for their families who have lost these men, it's very, very difficult. So peace can be held too. While it's not famous and while it's not "If you can dream it, you can do it," or any of the others I've written, to me is probably the one that I hold most dear, because I feel as though people should understand these men have lost a lot and their families have lost a lot. And to contribute to the Army Lead the Way Fund is a good thing. So that I just want to say that because I don't only do this, and the people that I know who do it also, we don't only do this to make money. We do this also for pro bono. We do pro bono work for a lot of different organizations. A lot of my colleagues have done a lot of pro bono work. And that's one I just wanted to mention because I felt as though it would be important.
Thank you for mentioning that. Any support for the Army, it's important to me. It's important to, and to many of us listening as well. And so, if you like, you can send me a link to that. I can post it on our show notes.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Happy to do that. This is related to Horizons. Did you ever ride Horizons?
No.
Oh, okay, interesting. It was there from 1983 to 1999. GE ended its sponsorship in 93. Sponsorships were a major part of Epcot Center attractions. It had a huge impact, not just on me, but on many others. And when people think of this attraction, the quote is what comes to mind. It's always the first, and really was an engineering masterpiece, as I like to call it. And you're part of that amazing story because of that quote. Your name may not be associated with it, in the general public, but we're going to try and change that. And I think it's important to make that happen. But thank you for your work that you've done. And
thank you.
Conversation about Horizons is a great conversation for me.
Of course.
And I'm fortunate to speak with a very nice person like yourself. I really appreciate that.
On behalf of Harold and me, thank you.
Thank you so much.